All right, we are back now with Dustin Luca of the Salem News. He's a crack, intrepid reporter for the Salem News. Dustin, good to see you in person. How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
We're doing all right. Obviously, Bill Newell is with us. Bill?
Hello.
All
Hey,
right,
Dustin.
here we go. Dustin, this is crazy, and we've met a couple of times at the office in person. We talked on the phone here, and
hmm
everything has changed in terms of how we do things, and maybe a little bit of background as to your. First of all, you're moving over to Rosewood Drive in Danvers, and
We
then
actually, the move already happened. We moved, God, second week of January, I think, or
Mhm,
something like that.
mhm.
So,
and that's the office. You're in the office right now,
yeah,
virtually.
yeah.
Okay, sorry, but it
No,
looks
no, no, it's fine.
it
No, it
looks
was weird though
awesome.
because we made the move in January and then we were there for I don't know, maybe a month and a half, and then everything that happened. I mean, you guys know all the stories in terms of everything locking down, people now working from home. So now, I mean, when I went into the office to get the picture that you're seeing behind me right now,
Mhm.
there was one, maybe two people in there, just an office manager and a salesperson, and that was it. So the place has basically been a ghost town because everybody's working from home.
So you have worked mostly. I'm gonna put on the road in quotes.
Yeah, basically. So either in my apartment or there's just another place. Just I find that I work better when I'm not in my apartment. So there's a couple of places in Salem I've been kind of crashing in my car, just where I can actually get some Wi-Fi, so I can see the world kind of still operating around me. Like right now, my car is actually hanging out off of Derby Street right now. So
Well, before I let Bill take over here, um, uh, you cover City Hall a lot. You cover City Council meetings. Have you done? You have done. What's that like in terms of your reporting now? How's that work?
it's been really different because just everything has changed basically overnight. So one of the big things that changed for the city was Governor Charlie Baker signed this thing into law so that meetings can be held remotely. So you don't actually have something like 20 people showing up at city council chambers when nobody should be standing near each other. So in a lot of the meetings I've been covering, and I've actually been covering more meetings as a result of all this, it's all been done through Zoom or some other kind of video platform or something like that, which of course has brought its own challenges, and that's been something else I've been having to cover. Initially, I was doing a lot of meetings just for the sake of saying that we're covering meetings to show that, you know, society is still functioning, government is still operating in the kind of best interest of the people. And it's been kind of interesting to see how mayors, city councilors, and things like that have kind of had to change what they do while we're also changing what we're doing, and all doing it in kind of the interest of public transparency and making sure that people still have access to, you know, the changes that are being made on their behalf.
Dustin, has there been a reduction in what's going on, even online for committees in the town? It seems like even the agendas are very narrow and focused to just get through the week to week, if you will. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's the case exactly in Salem, but clearly I think things have kind of backed off in the last several weeks.
Yeah, and they kind of have, but not because of a diminished access to being able to do things. It's just like if you think about when you go to like a city council meeting or something like that, they'll have an X page agenda that's got all these different issues on it. Those issues aren't really coming up right now because the people who are responsible for generating those issues just don't have the time right now because they're responding to COVID.
Right.
So there's been a couple of there's actually been a lot of attention on a couple of zoning proposals that are going forward in Salem, and a lot of people have actually been saying we shouldn't be talking about these right now because of COVID, because there's more important things going on. But these were all things that were actually submitted to the city council before COVID actually hit. So when they hold these meetings, is they're actually just continuing it. But overall, there isn't really many new things that are coming to the agenda. So that's why what you're kind of remarking on how the agendas are getting lighter and smaller and the meetings are getting shorter. That's why.
And I think another thing too is that cities and towns realize that the budget is the big monster out there, if you
Oh my
will,
God. Yeah.
or the elephant in the room. And what the reality is, there's just nothing that they can do about it right now. It's like you have this problem, but there's nothing, or possible, potentially a huge problem, because your income, your revenue coming into your cities and towns is way off. But and the as far as the state is concerned now, income taxes are delayed for several months, and so
Yep.
who knows what's going to happen. But it's like this huge problem. It's like, but we can't deal with it right now. Yeah.
And it's one of those things where not only are they having difficulty finding a way to deal with it, there's all these questions left in the air on how they're going to deal with it when they're finally able to. And you mentioned like the state budget and things like that. A lot of local towns rely on the state budget for grant money and things like that. And we don't know what that's going to look like because, you know, as you had mentioned, income taxes are all pushed off, and that's happening at the federal level as well. The federal government provides money to the states, which then filter that out to the public. One of the things that a lot of people are kind of grappling with at City Hall is how exactly they're going to form the budgets. And this is actually, I think, hitting Salem more than a lot of other communities that we cover, because Salem so heavily relies on the tourism industry in ways that you don't necessarily see in Peabody, in Danvers, and Beverly. You know, when their hotels basically went offline, that's a huge portion of the revenues they get. Parking revenues are massive for them, and that's not happening right now. And the mayor's talked a few times about how she thinks that the city will be able to get by for the rest of the fiscal year that ends on June 30th. But once you hit July 1st with the new fiscal year, kind of all bets are off in terms of where the money's going to be coming from, how they're going to be paying for it. I know what they're looking for is ways to make it so I think that they can try to offset the damage here, whether that be through cuts in programming or something like that. That way, when the revenues aren't there with the way they expect, they don't have to raise just as much money as before by increasing tax raising or something like that, which is kind of what everybody's afraid of right now.
What have you found with respect to the schools? This is such an unknown for them. You know, the whole thing of shuttering the buildings and then going online. And of course, so many, there's such a diverse population in Salem as there is, you know, elsewhere. What have you found with respect to that, Dustin, in general?
I found a lot of really impressive work. I mean, and these are people who, like the schools, are having to put together plans for something that they've never had to prepare for before. The idea that you could actually, you know, right a little past the midpoint of the school year, all of a sudden have all the kids learning from home using policies that did not exist. I mean, there's no way I think anybody could have prepared for literally society shutting down, but that's what we're dealing with here. And Salem has been grappling with some really interesting issues, and this is something I know is being felt across all lines and all communities. Those who are kind of below the poverty line or something like that, maybe they don't have, you know, as much money to actually be able to afford internet at home, so they can't do the online learning like other families can. And that's something the city is kind of partnering with Comcast, with the Salem Children's Foundation. This is a story we had in today's paper, to actually get 6 months of free internet to I think it's 213 remaining students who still do not have internet access as of right now. And that's a statistic I love throwing out there because I think it demonstrates the need that some households have over other ones that I think a lot of people can lose sight of or take for granted. I mean, everybody takes for granted the fact that you've got internet at home. That's something that some families can't even have. So if you can imagine being stuck at home and not having internet to do things like these Zoom meetings, to do classwork or things like that, that's a real struggle that a lot of people are dealing with. In the schools throughout the state have actually been doing a really wonderful job trying to find ways around that.
In Gloucester, the IT director for the city has recommended, or at least suggested to residents that they should unlock their Wi-Fi or put on social media their Wi-Fi password, temporarily change the Wi-Fi password so that neighbors can get into it.
Yeah, to kind of share the love.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, but by the same token, now the last thing I can think of is we talked to a restaurant owner of Finn's and the other restaurant there, Sea Level, over on Pickering
Yep.
Wharf, and we've talked to other restaurant owners, and those who can stay open, I don't want to say they're doing okay, but they're still open. Have you talked much? What's the business scene like?
The business scene is kind of doing what it can to try to get by right now. And that's, I mean, everybody kind of has their own way of doing it. A lot of them are sharing best practices. And we're actually starting to see right now, some businesses in Salem are starting to open back up. Like a couple that were really high profile this past week were Bambolina and Kakeshi. They've opened up new family menus and things like that. And these are two restaurants that were both kind of led by the same guys in downtown Salem that really focused on the scene, on the experience of coming in. Like Bambolina's, and that is a Neapolitan pizza place that has a wood oven that, you know, basically they throw together the pizza, throws into the oven, and you have it within 10 minutes. And it's like a texture that you don't really get from any other pizza. they really can't do that right now. So now Bambolina has shifted to this really interesting menu that has, cook at home meals. So they prepare the meal. All you have to do is throw it in the oven. And that's something that they launched either this past week or the week before, where they were still, offline beyond that. I know a lot of retailers in downtown Salem are either closed or finding ways of doing what they do online to try to basically find a way to survive through this. But there's a lot of concerns that the longer this crisis goes forward, the longer the shutdown happens, the more you're going to start seeing the lights turn off in downtown Salem in terms of businesses that just won't be able to survive this. So it's a little more grim in that picture compared to the schools or city government. But that's also, I think, because these businesses are relying on, dollars from the people that are owning them. And those are just dollars that are drying up right now because especially with the amount of job loss, the amount of layoffs, furloughs, the money just isn't there to try to keep these things online right now.
Also, too, about restaurants, Dustin, is that restaurants aren't geared up for takeout. And for spacing. In other words, the way they're designed is everyone funnels their way to the door, and they go in and then they spread out in the restaurant. That was the way it used to work. But this takeout piece, they're really not geared up for that at all. You know what I'm saying? And that a McDonald's and a Dunkin' Donuts are with the drive-through. But the restaurants, just don't physically have that available to them.
Yeah. And that's certainly one of the things. So where I live in Beverly is actually across the street from this restaurant called Flip the Bird. And it's a new restaurant that opened up this past year. And they've actually managed to kind of hold on to some of their success. I mean, I can just from my bedroom window look outside and I can see oftentimes, 4 or 5 people social distancing, but kind of, standing in there waiting to get their orders and things like that. But you're right. There's a lot of businesses that, did not have a takeout model that have kind of suddenly had to flip the switch on that. And I know FIMS and Sea Level are good examples of that. Longboards is another one in downtown Salem that's still finding a way to operate despite the fact that you can't actually take a table.
Bill, anything else to question?
I think it's good. I guess one last thing for Dustin would be maybe to update our listeners and viewers about the Salem News. And the reality was that the paper stopped printing the published paper on Tuesdays and Saturdays.
Yeah.
And maybe the impact that has had on you as a reporter.
So fortunately, it hasn't really impacted me. I know that there has been kind of some impacts on certain hourly associates, or not associates, but, people not getting the hours that they had in the past. And that's something I don't think it's unique to journalism. It's kind of happening all across the board. I know I've been, okay. And I think part of the reason why is because right now, more than ever, journalism is kind of really important in terms of actually getting information out to the people and things like that. We did have to cut our Tuesday and Saturday editions just because of the amount of costs that, we're losing. Because if you think about the way a newspaper, operates, a lot of it's very reliant on ad revenue and things like that. In businesses, because they're not open as much, the ad revenue isn't there. So unless the newspaper finds a way to adapt, it's going to basically be burning through money that it doesn't necessarily have right now. So it has been challenging, but we've all been finding ways of, making sure the paper still gets out at the end of the day. We're all doing it remotely from home. There's some headaches in terms of, making sure that we can all use VPNs to get in so that we have access to our email so that, the people who need to lay out the pages can do it from home and things like that. And that's been kind of a bit of a challenge as well. But, things we've been pulling through so far and things have been working out great.
Yeah, you look at the paper, you wouldn't notice a thing was different for sure. But
right.
But you're right. The printing piece is a big expense that people may not realize. The actual taking it out, printing it, and delivering it, all that's a huge expense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rick.
I think I have one last question on your reporting. How you do your reporting? A lot of your reporting, Dustin, involves face-to-face. You have to go visit people. You go to sites and so on. Some of it, of course, is on the phone. But how has that been part of the change in that now you have to get a hold of people by phone, by email, or by Zoom or whatever platform you use?
Actually, so this has changed for me quite a bit in a way that I think would probably surprise you. It's actually kind of gone in the inverse direction. So before COVID hit, normally I would do my work from within the newsroom, which you're seeing right here. In fact, if I can find a way to point so this monitor you see right here, that's my desk. Okay. Or no, maybe it's this one right here. I think that's so this piece of paper, that's my desk right there. And most of the time I would do all of my work via phone call or just by going to meeting or something like that. It was never really face to face, just because there's so many different things we have to juggle in the day. Now that we're doing things from home, I've actually been doing more of my interviews online through the Salem News Facebook page. And part of the reason for that is because, especially where people kind of locked up at home and they don't get a chance to engage with society the way that they used to. You can't really hang out with people. You don't have access to public officials in the same way. I've been making it a point to try to do these interviews through Zoom like you and I are doing right now, so that people can see the full interviews. They can see that, yeah, society is still functioning. And with that, they actually still get the access to their world that they so craved before. So actually there's a fire truck going by. I don't know if you can hear that. I apologize. But with COVID, with these live streamed interviews and things like that, it's actually put me face to face with people for stories more because of COVID as opposed to
Wow.
less.
Okay.
Well, we can look forward to that fire coverage in the paper tomorrow, Dustin.
Actually, this time every day for a while, they were actually doing.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm trying to see if the siren has stopped or not. One of the things that they've been doing is they've been doing a lot of like rolling rallies for hospital workers and things like that, where the fire department and the police department all get behind it at the same time. So I was kind of noticing usually around 2:30, 3 o'clock-ish every day is when it was happening. So
I'm waiting for the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds to fly over like they did in New York City and Philadelphia yesterday.
Yep.
I've never heard of both teams flying at the same time, so that's fabulous.
I know.
That's
and then
incredible.
that's one of the things that I think we need to not lose sight of, because it's easy to look at what's happening with COVID right now and realize that, it's hurting us in a lot of different ways. It's keeping us away from our loved ones, and it's very easy to share those stories. But at the same time, we're all talking in a lot of different ways that we didn't talk before, and we're all kind of looking out for each other. I mean, and a great example is where you were talking about in Gloucester, where people are, working to share internet connections. I feel like 6 months ago, something like that would have been unconscionable, because when you think about the access to data and security and what people could do with your internet connection, but now everybody's looking out for each other in a way that they weren't doing back during Christmas time last year even.
Well, I think it's a great way to end it. Dustin, we want to do this again. And we
Absolutely.
thank you very much for your time today.
No problem. Happy to do it. Thanks for having me on.